Are we all ready for Wednesday? Christmas gift shopping done, still a couple of days left. Food shopping done, well, maybe a little bit early for some of it. Decorations up. Ours have been up a month. We like to get organised. Christmas cards posted. Anybody take a loan out this year in order to send their Christmas cards? I like sending cards, but it is getting, for a Scottish person, it's a bit expensive, Email. But, for some people, what we've just been speaking about is really what they think Christmas is all about. Thank you, Meryl. But we know that Christmas is about Christ Mass. Without Christ, there is no Christmas. That has been Paul's mantra this year. Without Christ, there is no Christmas. And he's right. And it is a story. It's the story of Christmas. And I've been thinking a bit about, it's a little bit old hat. And even as Christians, it's very easy to get, we know about that. And we concentrate on buying presents and preparing. But there is a lot to the story. And familiarity sometimes breeds contempt, but we need a freshness of the Christmas story. Because there's angels, shepherds, Mary, Joseph, a star, kings, or astrologers, or wise men, or magi. So we become so familiar that we lose sight of what the story is actually about. And we can even think, it's nice for the children, It's nice to have the children. But actually, it's more than that. And the fact is that, if we don't have Christmas, we don't have Easter. And the other thing I've been thinking a lot about this year is that there's nothing usual about this story. There are so many unusual things about this story, and it's pivotal to our faith. So some of the unusual things we've mentioned already, there were angels speaking to Mary and Joseph, appearing to Joseph in a dream. Jesus born in a stable, that's not usual. Choirs of angels appearing to shepherds, and prophecies being fulfilled. Now this morning I've been asked to speak on Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 to 18, when the wise men come and see Jesus. Along the way, I'm going to dispel some myths, but let's read the story first of all. So Matthew chapter 2, starting at verse 1. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who is born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. "In Bethlehem, in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people, Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make a careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may come and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star that they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and of incense and of myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up," he said, "take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. "A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more." We don't usually hear that end bit of the story, which isn't very nice. So, who are the people in this story? We start off in verse 1 with Herod, King Herod. He actually wasn't a very nice man. He was quite ruthless, he was powerful, and he was brutal. And he had a bit of paranoia, so much so that he thought his wife and family were conspiring against him, and he had his wife, brother-in-law, and sons killed. So Herod has a checkered history. He was great at building buildings, and apparently the ruins of some are still around today. But he wasn't very good with people. So the other people in the story are the wise men. They were astrologers. That means they studied the stars. So they would have been very busy. Yesterday being the shortest day, there were a lot of people looking at the stars and the alignment of different things. So they had come from the east, Babylon in Persia. Now, one of the myths that I'm going to dispel is that they weren't kings. They were wise men, they were astrologers, they were from very well-to-do families, but they weren't, in fact, kings. And I'm sorry, there were 3 gifts, but not 3 kings. We don't know how many kings there are. But we know that they had set off at the time of Jesus' birth, and it wouldn't just have been a few of them. There would have been a huge entourage of people with them. So they didn't just creep into town and knock on Herod's door. There would have been an arrival of these wise men with their entourage. Verse 2 tells us that they go to Herod and they say, "Where is the one who was born King of the Jews?" Now, this must have been a red light for Herod right from the start, because he considered himself to be the King of the Jews. So you can imagine that tension was probably rising within Herod. And the next statement, and thanks, Mark, for the worship this morning. It was as if we had talked about what I was going to be preaching on. That we mentioned, that we're here to worship Even in the prayer meeting, we were saying about we want to worship. And that's what the wise men were going to do. They wanted to come and worship this new king. So they had studied the stars, and there was something unusual happening. Something in the sky was telling them that something was happening that was not usual. The star was quite striking. It was quite miraculous, and it was supernatural, and it was moving. It was showing them the way. So they decided that they would follow it to find this King of the Jews. And this was fulfillment of prophecy, where it says in Numbers chapter 24 that a star shall come and lead them. So verse 3 tells us that when Herod heard what the wise men were saying, he was disturbed, and also the people within Jerusalem. Now I thought to myself, hang on a minute, these are Jewish people. They must have known the law, and they must have known the prophecies, and a light should have gone on in their heads to say, this is the Messiah. This is what we've been waiting for. But they missed it. Now, we're not told why they missed it, but perhaps if Herod considered himself to be the king of the Jews, that he was quite comfortable with the position he was holding within the Roman Empire, and that the people were maybe quite comfortable with the way things were, and they didn't want to rock the boat. So the emotion that they had really was indifference. They thought, yeah, we don't recognize any of this. They didn't accept it as a fact, and they didn't accept it as a fulfillment of prophecy. And today, people are like that about the Christmas story. It's a common response that people don't really want to hear what the story is about, because it creates a little bit of discomfort. It maybe creates some difficult challenges. So therefore, a lot of people are quite indifferent to the crucial story of Christmas. So Herod, with his paranoia, maybe brewing, he calls the wise men aside and he asks them, you go and find this King of the Jews and then come back and tell me so that I can come and worship as well. Now, the internet's a great thing, and I've found a quote from Bruce Lee. Who'd have thought Bruce Lee would have had something? Bruce Lee said, "A wise man can learn more from a foolish question than a fool can learn from a wise answer." Let me say that again. A wise man can learn more from a foolish question than a fool learn from a wise answer. And this is what happened here. The wise men heard what Herod said and thought, hang on a minute, we're wise men. This is a foolish question that we're being asked. We're actually not going to come back. But they went and they found the King of the Jews. They found Jesus. They found not the baby. That's another myth that's dispelled. It says that he was now a child. He was no longer in the stable. He was in a house. And he was maybe 2 years old, about the same age as Levi. So they went to where Jesus was, and when they saw him, they were overjoyed. That word has been used this morning as well. that they were overjoyed, not just joyful and happy, but they were overjoyed when they saw Jesus. And you can't imagine that, a 2-year-old was what they would have been expecting. But they didn't doubt it. They were overjoyed and worshipped. So this was no ordinary child. The child had an unusual start in that he was born in a stable with all the animals around him. And this child started to grow. And there was something different because this child, Jesus, was the fulfillment of prophecy. And in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 2, it says, "The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them has light shone." When Jesus came as a baby and then grew to a child and to a man, Jesus was the light of the world. And in John chapter 8 and verse 12, Jesus himself says, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." Good to be reminded about that sometimes, particularly at this time of year. Sometimes it can feel dark and sad, but Jesus is the light of the world, and in him we have light. So Jesus is this child who brings hope to our darkness, not just when the wise men went to visit, but today. Today, our darkness can be dispelled by Jesus. For us personally, for us as a congregation, and for the nation as a whole. At the end of the day, Jesus is what it's all about. Jesus is the light of the world. So we've been encouraged earlier this month as a church to be involved in the big event of Shine Your Light. So there's a lot of light spoken about at this time, particularly this time of year, that light is shining today as back in that home in Bethlehem. Now, in verse 11, it tells us that the wise men, however many there were, brought 3 gifts. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail other than the fact that say that what the gifts were. They brought gold. These were rich men, so these gifts were generous of them, but within their scope. They brought gold, which tells us about Jesus' kingship. He was born to be king. They brought frankincense, which tells us about Jesus' deity, his godship. And they brought myrrh, which was a foreshadow, a foretelling of Jesus' death. When Jesus was born, he was born to die. So there were more miraculous events, because in verse 12, we're told that the wise men were warned in a dream not to go back to Herod. Through the Christmas story, there are so many miraculous events and appearances of angels, and it's amazing. So they were told not to go back to Herod. And this points out to us that right at Jesus' birth, there was opposition. There was opposition to Jesus even as a baby. The evil forces were at work. Satan was using Herod to try to find where Jesus was so that he could get rid of him. But God had a plan. Paul said to me, he said, I know you've got this fun fact, but do you really need to share? I really do need to share. You know, when you're sort of reading something, you think, I didn't know that. And it's quite obvious, really, when you hear it. But the Herod that we hear about in this story, who opposed Jesus' birth, his son was the Herod who mocked and ridiculed Jesus as a man before he went to Pilate to be sentenced to death. Now, did you know it was the same family line, or did you just think it was the same name? I thought it was interesting anyway, but Paul didn't think it was that interesting. So, as I said, right from Jesus' birth, there was opposition. And here we are again, Joseph getting a dream and asking him to move. That's what happened when Mary was pregnant. The angel came to him and said that you need to go. And here the angel comes to Joseph in a dream and says, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt and stay there until I tell you, because Herod is wanting to harm Jesus. And he was obedient. Thank goodness he was obedient. Jesus, he exposes sin in the world, and he exposes sin in our life. And Jesus, as a man, died because of our sin. So this child goes to the cross for you and for me. And Jesus, as I said earlier, is the light of the world. And he can heal our darkness and the darkness in the world. We are not alone, and we are not without hope. Now, this last bit of the story isn't as familiar as the first bit. We all know about these wise men coming, following a star, bringing gifts. But then Herod decides, I'm going to find this child and I'm going to do something. And rather than just specify one child, he decided that in the vicinity of where he was, that all boys under the age of 2 were killed. He felt so threatened by this 2-year-old child that he commanded that all boys under 2 would be killed. So Jesus' birth was a threat to kings in this world. And Jesus doesn't rule like other rulers. And when we think of some of the rulers today, and I'm not going to get political, but I could, but some rulers today, Jesus is not a ruler like those. In fact, in verse 6, he's described as a shepherd, a servant. So this Christmas, we come to the light of the world. And Jesus is the light of the world. And what was the good news that the shepherds had? The shepherds, they went to the stable and they worshipped the baby. The wise men, they followed the star, and when they found the child Jesus, they worshipped King Jesus. So Jesus was a baby, a boy. He then became a man. And at the age of 30, his life changed in that he started his ministry as the Son of God. He was the Son of God before that, but he started his ministry. And we heard from Merrill last week that about John the Baptist. And Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. And he calls his disciples to follow him. He performs miracles and healings. And right at the end of this book of Matthew 28 and verse 18, he says, "All authority in heaven and earth is given to me." And he calls us to go and make disciples, teaching and observing all that Jesus has commanded. And he says, "Behold, I am with you always to the end of the age." What an encouragement for every single one of us, that it's not just, oh yeah, Jesus is with us today, but he might not be with us tomorrow. He is with us every day to the end of the age. So we should be encouraged as the people of God to be his light in the darkness, because we have hope. We have hope. And like the wise men, we need to seek after Jesus. And we need to fall down and worship. And we need to find joy. And sometimes we do have to find joy. It's not always, oh yeah. You need to find joy. Because when the wise men saw Jesus the child, they were overjoyed. So Jesus is the light of the world, and he is all that we need. And the time of Advent reminds us that no matter how dark it gets, the light has come. And the light is coming again. So we need to be of good cheer. The darkness you feel today will not have the last word. Okay? The darkness you feel today will not have the last word. And this is a reminder for all of us, and I'm speaking to myself as well, that sometimes I need to be reminded, yet this darkness is only here for a while, because Jesus is the light of the world, and he is light in me. So let's consider this Advent time, this Christmas time, not about what we're going to eat, but let's look at it in a new, fresh, exciting, and joyful way. So there's challenges. Challenges. Oh no, she's going to challenge us. Well, God is, through me. So the question I want to ask you is, are you running to God's light? Are you being like the wise men and going to the light and trusting him in time of trouble? Am I emitting God's light? Is God's light shining through my life? Do I look like the light of the world? Sorry, I didn't mean to say it like that. Do I look like the light of the world, reflecting his glory to those around us? That's a challenge, because we don't always feel like doing or being that, but that is what we're called to be. Are we welcoming other people into the light? and accepting people, whatever their background, whether a shepherd or a wise man or anything in between? Am I accepting people? Am I going to let my light and our light shine so that lives can change as a result? Our lives will change, but the lives of others will change. So that's my Christmas challenge to you. Go to the light, run to the light, emit God's light, that we can be the light of the world, and that we will be welcoming others to the light, and that we are going to now and in the year ahead let our light shine. Let me just pray. Lord, we thank you for your word. We thank you that you speak to us through your word. And Lord, I thank you that your word is ever new. Lord, we know the story of your birth so well, but Lord, give us a fresh vision of your life on earth and your life in us. Lord, I pray that this Christmas that we will be able to focus on you and the impact that you made in our lives and make in the world. Be with us, Lord. Shine through us. Make us a light in the darkness. Amen.